love goes on, softly on. So don't be sighing or crying. Still live with our
And welcome to another podcast from Lawyers, Guns, and Money. Yet again, it is about Game of Thrones. However, this time we will be moving a little backwards in time and covering an episode that the upgrade to Google Plus made it impossible for us to actually do when it aired. We'll be covering The Bear and the Maiden Fair today, and I will let Stephen lead off because I know I've gotten the impression all you want me to do is talk about laser beams, and I'm not going to do that. So why don't we actually get to the real meat and potatoes of this podcast? Go for it.
Sure. So I thought there's sort of 5 topics I wanted to talk about. I thought we'd start with the kind of 3 linked scenes of Marjorie and Sansa, Tyrion and Brienne, and then Tyrion and Shae talking about ultimately the same question of how is this marriage going to work. And, you know, Marjorie offers this really interesting perspective. I mean, she's really focusing on this idea of as a wife and as a queen, you can have this long-term kind of behind-the-scenes influence, and pointing out that, you know, Tyrion is not that bad of a person to be with compared to Joffrey, although Marjorie shows no trepidation at the thought of marrying Joffrey. And I think by this point it's official that the Reach, or Highgarden, is the most gay-friendly place in Westeros, and that Marjorie is probably bi.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly the implication, and her talk of sisterhood does tend towards what, you know, in a contemporary context would seem like not quite hitting on, but at least feeling out, trying to see if Sansa's amenable. But yeah, those I've got to say, and as much as I've lauded the last couple of episodes, and this is actually also directed by Michelle MacLaren, who directed the episode that I couldn't stop praising. This episode is very boringly directed. The shots of Marjorie and Sansa are, in fact, very typical 2 shots, so building in a sense of companionship between the 2 of them simply by showing them in frame a lot together, but also just making them pretty. And there's no menace. There's no subtext. It's just these are 2 very attractive women having a conversation. Well, I guess whatever subtext there would be the sort of bisexuality, but I didn't even honestly pick up on that. I just it felt more like the popular girls having a conversation about, you know, the difference between dating the quarterback and the wide receiver. It really wasn't anything special. I mean, it was a nice, rich shot. The colors were lovely, as McLaren's usually are, but it felt very kind of just rote, almost.
Yeah, and, you know, even though this episode was written by George R.R. Martin, and his previous episodes have been excellent. I mean, the Blackwater, you know, was one of the best episodes this show's ever done. The Pointy End in the first season was also a great episode. This was not my favorite episode of the season, and it felt a little bit
like a screenwriter wrote it.
Well, I was going to say compressed. Like, there was a lot of stuff that had to happen in this episode, and as a result, there wasn't as kind of dramatic a through line as you would have expected. I mean, for example, you know, we get this really, you know, interesting scene with Robb and Jane, and the only kind of thing that you really get out of quite a few minutes, besides the fact that, you know, both Richard Madden and Una Chaplin are very, very attractive people, is that Robb Stark is a daddy, which has, implications for the fandom.
Yeah,
but this,
but I mean,
this didn't pop as well as, say, Second Sons did.
no, it certainly didn't, and that scene in particular. I mean, we've talked previously about significant asses. That wasn't one. That was I mean, that was sort of gratuitous nudity.
I don't know. I mean, I think it was important to show, because we haven't really. You've had one moment of passion between them back in the second season. I think it was important to remind the audience that these are two young people who are very much head over heels for each other, even though it's not particularly wise. And Robb brings it up himself. He says, how can I run a war when you're sitting there looking like that?
But I guess, this is a very. I guess the way I put it is, it's a very sort of the same way that teenage males imagine, sleepovers at females' houses, like that it's all pillow fights, and they hang out naked on the bed, and they do the sort of, cute, this is my ass, I'm going to bend my legs, and oh, I'm writing in my journal. Like, that's a very male's idea of what actually happens, post-coitus. And it's just, it also just, it goes on too long, and unlike the scenes with Littlefinger, I'm not seeing passion there. I'm seeing, what Nietzsche would refer to as spent passion, because there she is naked again, and Robb is just sort of walking around talking about war, and
all I can say is that there's a vocal element to the fandom that very much disagrees, and you can look to Tumblr for citations.
Oh no, I'm sure that I'm fighting the world and saying I want to see less of her ass, but yeah, it's.
I think it was more that people have been waiting a long time to see that many among the female half had been waiting a long time to see Robb's ass.
Oh, okay. Well, no,
and put up with Talisa as the price.
That makes sense. Okay, I can agree with that. I'm fine, with my heterosexuality. I'm okay with saying yes. Okay, I can see that. That is a very fine ass, and since it's not going to be anyway, yes, it's a fine ass.
Yes, which will be around for many and many a year.
May it live long and prosper.
Yeah. So back to the topic. Then we get Bronn offering similarly pragmatic advice to Tyrion, in which he basically says, look, you have to be married. Don't worry about love, because marriage is not about love in our society. And if you're smart, you can, have your cake and eat it too with Shae and Sansa.
And I guess it's not spoilers to discuss. We know how this works out. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting when I was breaking down the wedding scene in Second Sons is Bronn isn't there.
Yeah.
Well, he's not at the banquet.
He is in the procession, apparently.
Yeah.
When they're walking down the aisle.
When they're walking up, yeah. But he's not actually at the banquet.
No, he's in a kind of a liminal status, right? He's a knight now, which means he's of a particular status that excluding him completely would be seen as uncouth. But he's not among the 700 most powerful people in Westeros yet.
Yeah, I thought, and again, I rewatched the banquet so many times. It sort of stood out as you would have thought behind Tyrion, because Bronn knows Tyrion is up to something, and you would assume that he would at least be there for moral support. Now watch him actually have been there, and I just missed it because I was putting laser beams in everybody else's eyes. But
I don't think he would have been there, in part because I think, given that Tyrion was up to something, he wouldn't have wanted Bronn there to, tell him not to.
Yeah.
So,
but to get back to the scene with Tyrion and Bronn, it's the first of what we'll call the throne scenes in the episode, and I'll edit in some visuals later. But right around 16:25 in the episode, when we're introduced to this scene, Tyrion is sitting in this sort of slightly elevated position. Bronn is about 3-4 feet closer to the camera, angled down, such that they look like equals. But it's the way that Tyrion is bathed in light from behind. It's like Spielbergian kind of giant shafts of light. You expect Indiana Jones to be at the bottom of them. But it's the first throne scene in the episode, and we're gonna have a couple. We'll talk about them as we go on. But it's really significant that this is establishing Tyrion and his council. Like this is his
small council. His
small council.
Of councils.
Yes, it's just his hired mercenary who does seem to enjoy him more than a hired mercenary normally enjoys his employer, as we saw on the other side of the world. He's actually it's sort of a similar thing between Dany and.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that Bronn is the poor man's Dario.
Yeah, and I had a student last fall whose project was to edit a number of clips of Bronn and Tyrion sort of walking together, hopping together, talking together, and they actually set it to the music "So Happy Together," and turned it into this beautiful little. You
haven't seen the 1.5 Men video short, have you?
I have not.
Someone did Tyrion and Bronn from season 1 as like a trailer for a buddy comedy.
Yeah, this was a very similar thing, except it was a music video about a loving couple. Still not as good as the best one I ever received, which was re-editing of Fight Club into a gay romance film.
Well, it kind of is, although it's slightly masturbatory.
Anyway, yes.
Getting back to the plot, I mean, the one interesting thing I thought about this scene is that the specter of Tysha comes up.
Yeah.
And, I think in the back of... We have to remember in both this episode and in next episode that Tyrion's first wedding is very much in his mind throughout all of this. When he's thinking about the bride and whether he's going to be loved by his bride and what the costs of crossing his father are. That, at the end of the day, this is someone who's suffered abuse and trauma at the hands of his father, being forced to make a choice about, once again, will he be made complicit in the abuse of another person?
And he seems to, well, see, I think my head is just so much in Second Sons that it's hard for me to just talk about it in terms of, because Tyrion does seem to decide he's not going to be complicit in this in Second Sons, and then backs down when he realizes that he's pushed Joffrey too far.
Well,
or is almost.
I think he comes up to the edge of being complicit in this, because there is a slightly voyeuristic air to that scene where he's looking through the lattice at Sansa undressing. And I think he basically hits a wall where he says, this is a child, I can't do this, morally.
Yes, and they set that up nicely in the last episode by having her declare aloud that she is but 14. And that seems to be a line that Tyrion has decided, I wouldn't say for moral reasons, but at least for practical ones.
Well, no, it is also for moral reasons, because, in part, that was about how old he was when he got married. The first time.
No, that does make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking... Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking back to his conversations with Jon Snow in Season 1, where he was sort of making a connection with the Starks as, as a little person talking to a bastard, and Jon actually expressed concern, for his sister. And there's I forget the exact dialogue, but the implication was, Oh, you mean them both? Like, not just Arya, who Jon is obviously concerned with, but also Sansa. And
I've completely missed this. I thought the only thing that Jon talked about with Tyrion in terms of his family was Bran, but I'll take your word for it.
yeah, no, I'm pretty sure. Maybe it's in the books and not the series. I don't know, but there's just a moment where I think Jon's saying that he's not going to be able to take care of Arya, and he's done what he can, and he worries for both. My point is that I think the relationship between Jon and Tyrion, even though it's at this point non-existent and
extremely attenuated by distance, let's say.
Yeah, but I think Snow made an impression on
sure
on Tyrion. Go on.
You know, and there's that that line in the beginning. You know, when he first when he meets Sansa for the first time on screen in the first episode of season 2. You know, that line about a wolf surrounded by lions. You know, he clearly empathizes with her in terms of this is someone alone, isolated, and under threat.
Yes, have we talked about the circles yet in this show?
We've talked about the circles.
The many circles, yes. So wolf surrounded by lions. Okay.
Okay, so moving on, just because we've got a lot to talk about, I don't want us to go on forever and ever and ever. We then have this interesting scene with Shae, where he offers her golden chains, both literally and figuratively, in the sense of, I'm going to make you my kept woman, I will have a place where I keep you, and she refuses, and offers instead, basically, run away with me. And there's this kind of conflict, because at the end of the day, as much as he's done with his family in an emotional sense or in the sense of loyalties, he does have a point that, as a Lannister, he has a life that he could not enjoy if he were anyone else, that he doesn't want to be a clown. And, there's this kind of breakdown of a relationship between him and Shae, we think, at the moment, over this issue of which of them are going to kind of give up on a status that they want.
And I don't think either is... Wait. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, it just said it muted my mic for some reason.
Yeah, it says that too, but the little sound bars are still going, so I think that's just old status.
Yeah, Google. Yeah, it's a... I don't know. Google's completely derailed my train of thought, so continue.
Okay. All right. So I was going to move on to this scene with the Dany and the Yunkish representative, which was one of the scenes in this episode that I did find really interesting and exciting. Both on a plot level and a visual level, because seeing those 3 dragons, moving around, fighting each other over meat, interacting with people other than Dany, they really felt real. And on a plot level, this is a very interesting moment where Dany chooses revolution over a payoff. That she's not going to go to Westeros if going to Westeros means accepting the continuation of slavery. That she is going to hold out for the liberation of, 200,000 slaves and reparations to boot, which is, given that when I get to this part in my chapter analyses, I'm going to be rereading a lot of historical literature on American Reconstruction.
Yeah,
it's a good sign.
Given that my dissertation was sort of at the end of that period, shortly thereafter, I would say that Dany has come very late to the cause. It's sort of, she reminds me sort of, like Obama on gay marriage, right? That he's finally discovered. You have a feeling all along he felt that way, but it just now occurred to him to.
I think that's a bit harsh in the sense that, as I've argued to you in the past, Dany is a former slave.
Yeah.
And this is the first moment where she's had real political, military, geostrategic power, and she's making her choice.
Oh, actually, no, we're not disagreeing. I'm
okay.
I guess what I'm saying is that, much like Obama, who I sincerely believe never really took church seriously and isn't actually a very religious man, which is not an insult from my perspective. But he knows he knows he has to play the part in order to be an elected official. I think Dany sort of held back on the slavery issue until, I don't think it's a coincidence that she sees, the first time she declares herself Khaleesi is when she sees a slave being whipped and orders it stopped. She's made this her cause, and people have given me, crap for what I said about her, but I think she's devoted to it, and I think she honestly really wants to free slaves, but I don't buy the idea that this is in some way unrelated to her desire for the Iron Throne. Like I think there's a bit too much pragmatism to her, her anti-slavery position.
Except that this scene kind of argues the complete opposite, which is if Dany was completely pragmatic, if the Iron Throne was her goal, full stop, she should have taken that deal. She should have grabbed the ships, taken her army to Westeros, and staked her claim for the throne. Instead, she said, I'm going to fight it out on this.
Yeah, but her dragons aren't big enough yet, and I think she's well aware of that.
They're not as big as perhaps would be ideal, but if Dany landed in, say, Dorne, with 8,000 of the finest infantry in the world, and 3 living dragons, you would see the political situation. It is true, she wouldn't have total hegemony yet, in the same way that Aegon had it during the conquest.
Hold on, we need Farley here. Where is...
Yeah,
where's Robb? You're talking to the wrong LGM blogger.
3, the equivalent basically of 3 helicopters with napalm. In a medieval world.
She needs Blackhawks being launched off of aircraft carriers. This is Robb's territory.
She's pretty close. Look what her dragons did to Astapor.
Yeah, but that was more of a threat. That wasn't really a...
Did you see the giant fireballs? They were setting the city on goddamn fire.
Well, yeah, but it wasn't a full-grown dragon.
Yeah, it wasn't that yet. But I'm saying, if you land in Dorne with 8,000 of the finest infantry, you can give yourself a good foothold, and in a year, your dragons are going to be there.
Yeah, it was sort of a, you call that a knife? No, this is a knife. Oh, actually, hold on, wait. Give me a year, it'll be a sword. Kind of moment. And I don't know. And the one thing I'll say is that I'm always suspicious of moments that I find particularly rousing, where I get behind, because those tend to be usually slightly fascistic. It's it's the moment in every Batman film where you're like, all right, everyone needs to cede all authority to the Batman because one wealthy man can do better than the entire state apparatus at eradicating this criminal, and we should just cede all power to him.
On the other hand, you have, rousing moments in, say, the Young Mr. Lincoln, which are explicitly, non-fascist and arguably anti-fascist. It's a big romantic moment, full stop, which includes both fascistic and non-fascistic variants.
Yeah.
What I'll say is that, I think George R. R. Martin is not uncognizant of that, and that going forward we are going to see an interrogation of whether Dany is going to follow through on this, whether she's fully thought this through, and whether she's ready to pull this off. Because once you've committed yourself to a social, political, and economic revolution, you have to do the follow through.
And yeah, without talking too much about what
Books,
happens, yes, everyone knows we've both read the books, but I'll just say it's sort of unclear whether or not she's trying to be a Lincoln-esque social revolutionary, or if she's Hannibal with elephants going after Rome. I mean, there's a
bit of both.
Yeah, and
I mean, it's not like Lincoln didn't have, self-interest in the mix when he was considering emancipation.
Well, no, I certainly wouldn't claim that he otherwise, but it's just there is a, and it's something that we haven't talked about, but it's something that gets brought up in my class a lot, because my class is majority non-native and or Asian American, and so the idea of Dany as a foreigner, and the dragons as being sort of representative of that foreign threat, and they read her much more warily.
No, this has been
than we do.
On Tumblr and on the forums about Westeros, there has been this huge debate about, is Dany an imperialist figure? And I'm gonna link. I'll send you the link to a piece I wrote in which I say, yes, that's true. There's certainly the semiotics are there, the symbolism is there, but that's not an analysis grounded in the actual history of Westeros and Essos. I would argue Dany is not Hannibal so much as imagining if Scipio Africanus suddenly appeared in, 145 AD and started making war on the Romanized Carthaginians there.
And you realize we just lost everybody.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about Tyrion's manhood.
Which is fine. I'm fine with that.
Excuse me, Theon's...
I was a
Theon's
Latinist.
manhood.
I was a Latinist, so I do know what you're talking about. I just have a feeling once we start talking about when Scipio Africanus was okay. But okay, so yes.
Let's go from highbrow to lowbrow.
Yes, they castrated Theon.
Yeah, he's got no more junk.
I'll admit, in a strange way, that I pay too much attention to the visuals, and apparently not enough, because I missed that the first time through, and it's a very sort of Joe Christmas moment if you've read Faulkner, Light and August. It's a because it's not, and I won't say that any castration is ever probably pleasant, but this is of the tie down castration variety, which almost got Faulkner's Light and August banned in America because it ends. Sorry, spoilers for those of you American literature fans. It ends with a bunch of men taking the half white, half black Joe Christmas, putting him on the ground, knee to the chest, castrating him, and letting him bleed to death. And I didn't realize that this is what was going on in this scene with Theon, minus the bleeding to death, because that would defeat the purpose. We have to keep him alive. It's no fun to castrate a man and just let him die.
Well, as Ramsay said, I'm not going to kill you. I'm just making adjustments.
Yeah.
This is a part of a plan that Ramsay has to recreate a person in Ramsay's preferred image, and you can see the fingerprints everywhere. I mean, first of all, the scene where the two women come in is almost a total reversal of Theon's normal pattern with women, that they are basically sexually assaulting him. And Theon is not reacting to this in like, ooh, this is sexy, I'm about to have a threesome way. He's terrified. He's terrified of Ramsay is going to stop this. Ramsay is going to hurt me because this is not allowed. But I'd argue, he's also afraid that he's lost it, that he's going to be impotent. And it's notable that as he's done with Theon's finger, Ramsay waits not until Theon consents, because arguably I'd say he does not consent at all at any time during the scene, but until Theon becomes somewhat complicit. Right? He grabs that woman's hips. He is, in a sense, responding to a part of his identity that has been grounded in his sexual prowess. I mean, we've seen that from his very first episode in this show, that he is someone who sees himself as a man because he can have sex with women, and whether they want to or not. And Ramsay is out to make him not a man anymore.
And this is very much, I mean, I would say that Theon is, for the first time in his life, using sex to please someone else, Ramsay, as opposed to using it for its own ends, which has been his entire life. He's actually trying to make Ramsay happy by, oh, okay, you're going to give me women, I will have sex with them. I'm not going to try it. I think it's a scene that is going to end up being very misunderstood for that reason, because most people don't believe that you can rape a male, that a woman can rape a male. But this is a scene of coercion and extreme coercion where Theon has utterly given up, and there are these. It's shot very strangely, because we move from Theon's terrified face to what are really sort of generically pornographic images of female bodies, be they surrounding Ramsay or on top of Theon. But we get these. It's sort of. I don't know how to say this. It's sort of like the most ineffective pornography ever, because it's one of the participants is always crying, and it's really easy to understand that if we imagine it from the female perspective of a woman being forced on top of a man and crying while they're having sex. But it's really difficult for us to process, just because of the way the culture understands rape, what it's like for Theon. And I think Michelle MacLaren, who again I do love as a director, even though I found this episode a little visually boring, she is actually trying to communicate that this man is in a situation that it's not unprecedented, it's not unnormal, it's just horrible. He is having sex to please another, and it brought to mind a lot of those 70s films about male prostitutes, obviously Midnight Cowboy being the most obvious, but those scenes where very attractive straight men are realizing that there is profit to be made, and then they're realizing that they have no choice but to make profit from their sex. And it's a very disturbing scene, much more so than I thought initially when I first watched it. Rewatching it today was just horrifying, top to bottom. It was just awful. Don't make me think about it anymore. I don't want to.
Okay,
I'll touch the parts of the doll where I think Theon's been hurt.
Where George R. R. Martin hurt your mind.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to a more happy relationship. I mean, I think Jon and Ygritte kind of worked for me in this episode more so than when they were fooling around in the caves, because she's kind of been mocking him nonstop, in the manner of a young boy pulling on someone's pigtail, and this is the first time in which she and Jon are kind of on level footing, in that she's now in his world and she doesn't know anything. She doesn't know the history. She doesn't know what a windmill is.
But she knows how to shoot an arrow.
She knows how to shoot an arrow.
Better than Jon.
At the same time, she wants a nice silk dress. So there's a kind of a negotiation going on about what their relationship is going to be like.
There is, but what's interesting is that when she and Jon are talking about how to properly shoot an arrow, it goes back to the first episode where Jon is trying to teach Brienne how to properly shoot it. And so I don't think they're entirely equal yet. And in all honesty, I don't think they're ever going to be entirely equal. Change the setting, change the... I think there's still a sense of superiority that she has, and she won't let go of, and sort of doesn't.
Yeah, but I don't think that Jon completely believes. I mean, he was arguably completely helpless up in Beyond the Wall. He didn't understand how the rules worked. He is now in a place where he does understand how the rules work, and that's kind of the tragedy that they're about to face. Is that they're stuck between two huge social forces, and the kind of the decision they come to is this line about if we die, we die, but first we'll live. Coming right before all of you or all of us. There's the wildlings, there is everything south of the wall, and then there's them stuck in the middle.
Stuck in the middle with each other, yeah. And there's a lot of being stuck in the middle of. And again, I don't want to go back to circles or bring up the whole scene with Jaime, Brienne, and the bear, but there will be a lot of being stuck in the middle of something. Yes, with a circle. But the one thing I would say about those scenes. With Jon and Ygritte, is that they are shot completely conventionally. They are typical romance two shots. The close up on both of them. I mean, it's textbook stuff. If you want to make two people look close, you put them in a two shot. If you want to make them look intimate, you put them in a two shot and a close up. And people will believe that they now have a deep and abiding connection with each other, and they certainly seem to. And the one thing that I will say is that the last time we saw Jon in a close-up with someone like that, well, all I'll say is it was Jon and a direwolf, not Jon and another person. And
hey, direwolves are people too.
At
least in the books they are.
Yeah.
I mean, they have personality.
No, they do, and it's in terms of since Jon has left Winterfell, the people he's grown close to, the only one he's let into, or that the directors or showrunners have allowed to be seen in close up with him in that manner are a direwolf and Ygritte, and I'm just saying.
So let's talk about another romantic pair, Jaime and Brienne.
And now you've just upset a whole bunch of people by calling them a romantic couple.
Well, they are in the shall we say, chivalric romance tradition.
I don't think so. I think they're more in the sort of contemporary old married couple. Especially
in this episode, I would say.
But they've never. There's no indication that they've ever been in love. That there were moments of great passion between them. They seem to have come to that. Yeah.
Sorry, you cut out for about half a sentence there.
Okay, so I'll start over. They seem like an old married couple. There's no sense of there having been a great romance between them. We know there wasn't. No great moments of passion. No, they've reached the point of they need each other. And they love each other, and they're going to be together.
Okay, I mean, let me present my counter argument.
Okay.
The moment between them when he's leaving, and there's this whole thing about the promise between them and keeping oaths and, what counts as saving someone's life. That's incredibly soaked in the tropes of chivalric romance. It's all about keeping your word and knightly vows and the vows that we make to one another. And the fact that, at the end of the scene, she calls him Sir Jaime. And
yeah, but those are the things you say. They're not the sort of bedrock of a stable relationship. Those
of course
are
not, because chivalric romances are inherently unstable relationships.
I mean, this is sort of like
They've gotta
Bruno
end
Mars.
in death.
Yeah, and exactly. I was going to say, this is sort of like Bruno Mars. I would, jump on a grenade for you.
Yeah.
Like that. No, that's not love. Love is if you throw a grenade, if I will fall on it, but I do have permission to now throw it somewhere else. Right? That's true love. The ability to
that's
the
modern
falling on
true love, though.
But I think that
evil true love is all about literally pining to death over somebody, seen as a good thing. It's not.
Yes, but that's not what we have here. What we have here is not.
Jaime's about to jump into a bear pit.
That's what
woman.
I'm saying.
I rest my case.
No, I rest my case.
That's the least
that's my
rational
point.
thing imaginable.
No, that's my point. It's totally rational in the sense that they're just an old married couple. And yeah, all right. If I see a bear attacking you, but they don't have the bait.
He doesn't go for the crossbow and say, "Shoot this bear." He says, "I am going to go in there empty-handed." And in the books especially, there's this great line where he jumps into the pit. He doesn't have a sword. He doesn't have a weapon. And he says to her, "Are you still a maiden?" And she says, "Yes." What does that have to do with anything? And he says, "Good. I only rescue maidens." It couldn't be more blindingly obvious.
I just, again, and I understand exactly what you're saying, and I've read my fair share of medieval romance, and I just their actual relationship as portrayed on the show and in the books is not. It's not the beginning of a medieval romance. It's the end of a contemporary marriage. Not the end, but the life of a contemporary married couple. I
think we'll have to agree to disagree on this point.
Okay, well, we'll let people decide. If you want to vote for Scott, download this from iTunes. No, crap, I can't do it. Yeah, no Carson
Daly.
Daly.
Put up a poll on the eventual post. Does Lowe's Guns Money? Can you do that? We can have
maybe?
people vote in the comments.
Yeah, we can have them vote in the comments. All right, so vote in the comments. Which one of us is right? Are they an old married Jewish couple, or is this the beginning of a hot and sexy romance between Brienne and Jaime?
I said medieval romance, chivalric romance. Ergo, you can't be hot and heavy. The whole point is the not having hot and heavy.
Well, there goes my chance of winning. All right, so I should, because we're running a little short on time because we're chatty motherfuckers. The one thing I will say visually about this episode that was interesting, and I want to leave room for more discussion of the bear. But I don't know if you noticed, and maybe if you did notice, you only noticed because you've been listening to this podcast and or reading what I've been writing, but there was about 35 minutes in the second half of this episode that was entirely green. It seemed to be taking place in the exact same setting. We had Jon and Ygritte, we had Bran and Osha, we had Jaime and the Chainless Master. The Chainless Master obviously sort of lining up with the Tyrion plotline. Yeah. But we had all three of these scenes. They all seem to be taking place in the exact same field, where the camera just kind of shifted to the left, and shifted to the left, and shifted to the left, and just captured them. But given that we were talking last week about the sort of almost inertial quality of people moving toward the phrase, I think it's really interesting that in the episode before that, we already have this sort of visual bringing together of these characters, of associating them all with the, rolling hills of, I thought Scotland. You say Ireland, but
well, it's Northern Ireland.
Northern Ireland.
They're filming in around Belfast.
Okay, but it's the exact same geology, the exact same territory, and it's beautiful. But the one thing that it really brings to mind is the last time we saw this was outside of Winterfell, early in season 1. This is the land in which, you know, poor Will was beheaded. This is the land in which, you know, Ned Stark taught Bran what it means to be a just lord, where he taught Jon what it means to care for Bran. It seems not at all unintentional that they're reminding us at this moment, in particular, that, and again, I'm trying to say this without going too far, but that at this moment, all of these people are bound together despite being in disparate places. Sure. I mean, we know that, you know, geographically, they're all over the map, but geologically, and
they're all in one place.
They're all in one place, and the way that that's going to affect our brain as an audience, we're going to make connections between them, and that might have something to do with kind of countering the tendency of people who read the novels to kind of constantly be asking, where the fuck is Bran? Where the fuck is Arya? Like, where the fuck are, like,
something nice about the TV medium, is that these storylines that can often seem incredibly disparate in the novels, I mean, especially if you are someone who went through that wait from A Storm of Swords to A Dance with Dragons, where the cast was literally split for, you know, upwards of 11 years now. You know, the one thing that the TV can do is by putting a scene with Daenerys right next to a scene in Westeros, she seems more unified than it works on the page.
Well, no, it's the power of contiguity. I mean, it's just you put things next to each other. I mean, it's just, and people are going to try to figure out how they relate. I mean, it's juxtaposition in poetry. It's just it's how we try to make sense of what shot comes after the next. And I discussed this in that post I did about the wedding banquet, where I talked about how it opens with a long shot of Joffrey and Cersei staring at something, but we don't know what she's staring at, and then it cuts to a close-up of Tyrion drinking wine, and that doesn't seem to be the line of sight for Joffrey and Cersei, but because they're next to each other, our brains think, okay, they must be looking at him, even though they're not, and so McLaren is deliberately trying to confuse us. Here, I think she's trying to do the opposite. She's not trying to confuse us at all. She's trying to make us see that these characters, as far apart as they are geographically, are still related in ways that are important, even if you know, disparate. But visually, it's very compelling, and I'll add this to the podcast. So if you watch it, you can see the images, and if you don't, you can read the post, and I'll post the images of the various people, and you can see what I mean.
All right, so, I'm done. I'm out of topics.
You're out of topics. Well, you know, I feel like, and maybe it's just that you can't ever not talk enough about a bear, but
okay, we can talk more about the bear.
I really don't have anything to say about the bear other than it's really fucking scary. It's like it's a giant bear.
And it was a real bear. And I'm impressed by the lengths to which they went to get this right. I mean, they filmed half of this scene in Belfast, and then the other half in Los Angeles, because bears are not allowed to travel, and actors are. And, you know, it came off really, really well.
That sounds like the beginning of a terrible, like, you know, Poconos joke, right? So bear gets on an airplane and demands a drink. But yeah, it's better than Life of Pi. But it's in terms of, you know, we get an actual bear and we're not sitting there going, oh no, be scared of the not real tiger.
CGI tiger.
Yeah. But it's I guess I don't have much to say about the scene visually. It's a pit scene, and pit scenes are always sort of shot the same way. They're always not close-ups, but they're always in on the action in an almost sort of documentary style. The filmmaker is in the pit with the contestants. And
Yeah.
if you want to go back, you can look. There's an episode of Angel in which he jumps in a pit. Same thing. There's an episode of Breaking Bad where Walt is fighting people inside of an enclosed space. Same thing. So it's not really visually interesting. It's just that's a beautiful.
And dare we mention Spartacus?
Well, yeah.
I mean, a show that a good half of is people fighting in pits.
Yeah, although they did too much with it. I mean, that's the thing. They realized that you can only do so much in a pit, so now we need slow motion, mid-air jumping, blood hitting the camera, and that's the thing it's the breaking of that fourth wall. Like, just let the blood keep going. When it hits the camera lens, the show turns to shit. You're like, oh wow. Yeah, well, I'm safe.
That's what I kind of like about what they did with the bear pit is that, you know, Brienne was enduring an ordeal, but I wouldn't say that either she or Jaime appeared heroic in the conventional action movie sense.
Not at all.
They were people, you know, seriously.
No, they were both
under threat from a natural force, and at the end of the day, they couldn't defeat it. They didn't. They just survived.
No, and it's naturalistic in the sense that they both had the kind of reactions that you imagine anyone who isn't part of some sort of heroic narrative what they would think if they found themselves one-handed in a pit with a bear. They're clearly like mulling their options. They're thinking through and realizing, this isn't. Yeah, this is not, and I know we've brought this up before, but this is not Luke Skywalker at the Pit of Sarlacc. This is not. We have a big plan, and we're going to. This is.
You know,
I'm jumping to the pit.
We need to get out of there.
Yeah. Did anyone else notice? You made a bear. You made a bear. To quote Buffy, or for some reason, going to Angel now. I'm gonna go to the Thanksgiving episode of Buffy. Spike yelling, "You made a bear!" But yeah, when bears appear, people generally don't react heroically. And I don't know if you know what you're supposed to do when you see a bear, but the answer is run away.
Well, I mean, I think you're supposed to run uphill, because bears can run upright but have problems going uphill.
All right, well, they're your survival
survival tip for the day.
This has been another Lawyers, Guns, and Money podcast with Scott Eric Kaufman and Stephen Admiral, and we hope you enjoyed it, and we apologize for being a week late. So,
see you at the wedding.
Oh.
Thank you for listening to the Lawyers, Guns, and Money podcast. If you liked what you heard, or even if you didn't, consider contacting us at lafarkinsblog@gmail.com or consider donating at www.lawyersgunsmoneyblog.com/whoarewe.